the FBI coordinated multiple field offices to target Catholics as possible terrorists. So the people who really hated Trump for the Muslim ban because it targeted Muslims as terrorists, they should be furious about this, right? Those same people.
You think, yeah.
They're not. Ironically, those same people who champion this are the ones who scream bloody murder when Islamic people are associated with terrorists. So that means that they're choosing. You can speak up against racial profiling of Islamic people, but say nothing when it comes to Catholics. You can't have it both ways. So just as a thought experiment, let's go over this story and let's kind of pretend, I'm going to talk about the FBI targeting Catholics, but pretend that this were instead about Muslims, and ask yourself if the public response would be similar or different. In my opinion, all racial profiling is damaging. And so, you know, do we choose only one group over the other? Let's just play that game, okay, as we go through this. So why would Catholics be associated with terrorist activities? The FBI memo said that traditional Catholics from the disfavored radical traditional Catholics groups could be characterized as embracing anti-Semitic, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ, and white supremacist ideology. Now, here is the backstory and where that comes from. In February, a whistleblower leaked a heavily redacted report from the FBI's Richmond office called Interest of Racially or Ethnically Motivated Violent Extremists in Radical Traditionalist Catholic Ideology almost certainly presents new mitigation opportunities. Like, opportunities is a weird word. Like, this is a place we can go and find some ne'er-do-wells. Right. Catholic Church.
We haven't thought about this again. How about Catholic churches are a place where we can find some new opportunities for mitigation?
Right.
Like, you know, surveillance and mitigation and arrests or kicking in people's doors.
It's almost like they want to find it there, right? Opportunities. It's just a strange word. It's not like, oh, that's a threat or this is a cause for concern. It's like, yeah, we can root out some bad guys there. Let's go find them, right? Yeah. I'm sure there are plenty of bad guys in the Catholic Church.
Does it kind of seem...
And an Islamic church and a Jehovah's Witness church. I'm sure there's a lot of bad guys everywhere, right? But they're like, let's farm some out right here.
Well, I feel like the Mormon church, they're more libertarian leaning. It seems like that'd be a better target than Catholics. Like, I can't...
Oh, wait for those memos to come out.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
This is just slow your roll. I'm sure this is just one group of religious folks that we're targeting first.
Yeah.
You know, way to target these guys. And how about the $154 billion a year industry in child trafficking? The United States is the leading purveyor of it and the leading consumer of child trafficking.
Right.
Priorities, though. Go after the Catholics.
All right. Well, the sources that are used to validate this report to target Catholics as a hate group came from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and that's a group that targets conservative groups. And even the mainstream media acknowledges that this group is highly problematic. This is from the New Yorker in 2019. So this is how you source your report on targeting extremists, using another extremist group as your source. Like, you got to do your homework a little better than that, guys. Jim Jordan and Mike Johnson from the House Judiciary Committee sent a letter to Christopher Wray, head of the FBI, asking about this back in April. And Director Wray acknowledged that the memo was from the FBI, but was withdrawn. But whatever marching orders it had about Catholics, the die had been cast, right? He also said that the FBI was investigating itself to see how this memo came about. So don't worry about it. They're investigating yourself. Now, before you get, upset that they're investigating yourself, we can have, I want to say, like, there's a shred of hope here because the John Durham report seemed to have been well done in debunking Russiagate.
Yeah.
Right. So the FBI can investigate itself. We can hope that it can. We don't know how big of an investigation this will be, if it will be someone to the caliber of John Durham will be put on it, or if it's just one of those like, yeah, Mom, I cleaned my room, right, kind of things.
Right.
But
what are the socks doing still on the floor?
Right. We just don't know.
Right.
But this took a heavy-duty taxpayer-funded special prosecution for Russiagate. We just don't know how much we're going to get over this. They're targeting Catholics bit. Now, how did they validate this idea of Catholics as dangerous? They had at least one undercover employee who was infiltrating religious groups. This is from Jim Jordan's memo about this back in April, saying the FBI similarly noted 2 other opportunities. Again, there's that word, opportunities, to engage in outreach with religious institutions in the Richmond area, citing a desire to sensitize the congregation to the warning signs of radicalization and enlist their assistance to serve as suspicious activity tripwire. So basically enlist whole church groups to be on the lookout for terrorists within their own organization. Now, that's kind of not what you're supposed to do at church. You're supposed to support each other to be good, not look out for who's bad. That creates this whole sort of judgmental, that defeats the purpose. I've been to church enough to know that. The FBI also expressed an interest in leveraging existing sources and or initiating Type 5 assessments to develop new sources with the placement and access to report on suspicious activity. This is Jim Jordan writing, the document itself shows that its contents, including its proposal to develop sources in Catholic churches, were reviewed and approved by 2 senior intelligence analysts and even the local chief division counsel. And so the whistleblowers have advised that the FBI distributed this documents to field offices around the country. Now, Director Wray said that this report didn't meet the FBI's exacting standards. And he told the House Judiciary Committee in July that, look, this was a one-off, that this report was a single product by a single field office. That's a direct quote. Turns out that wasn't true. It went to several offices.
So it wasn't just one bad apple, one field office. It was actually part of a larger network of field offices.
And so we know this because on Wednesday, the House Judiciary Committee sent a letter refuting this, saying the report was used in at least 2 other field offices, Portland and Los Angeles. That's interesting, right? Because those are places with problems of Antifa violence. Where's the memo on that? So this contradicts the testimony of Director Wray. Now, I'm going to play you his testimony, and it is a little long. I'm going to warn you. It's about 5 minutes, and we might stop and start a couple of times because it's sort of hot. And Jim Jordan is getting to the bottom of this, like, why Catholics? How did this come about? And it doesn't, I also want to say, in the spirit of spiritual collectivism, it almost doesn't matter if you're Catholic or not, because if you think about a group of people who are assembled with good intentions to worship around something that they hope makes their lives better and endears them to a community, and the FBI is saying, we're going to take those communities and use them as nesting grounds for bad guys and try and turn them on each other. It doesn't matter if it's Protestant or Catholic or Islamic or anything. It really shouldn't matter because you should not want this for any well-intentioned group. Right now, I know we could go into problematic dogma around any given church, right? But I think collectively we should hope that these groups are not used for the intent of either entrapment.
Entrapment. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, look what happened with Meg Whitman?
Gretchen Whitmer?
I always said Meg Whitman. I'm thinking of like
she's the person from eBay.
Gretchen Whitmer, but like putting in out of 24 people, putting in 21 undercover agents, and 3 of them are nefarious, and almost all of them are undercover in order to try to bring these people in or entrap these people, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think, you can have whatever problems you want around organized religion or any kind of dogma or whatever, but it means a lot to a lot of people. And so to think that the FBI would use this as a place to root out certain people, it's basically, and I'm sorry I'm going to use this word about a religious organization, but you're bastardizing a organization that means a lot of things to a lot of people. And so for that reason, I find that not just because I want to defend organized religion or defend Catholics, I think that there's more than just dogma here. So let's watch Jim Jordan take on Christopher Wray, and remember that what he says here turns out to not be true. So go ahead and
what's the difference between a traditional Catholic and a radical traditional Catholic?
I'm not an expert on the Catholic orders.
Well, your FBI wrote a memo talking about radical traditional Catholics. I'm just wondering if you could define it for us.
Well, what I can tell you is you're referring to the Richmond product, which was a single product by a single field office, which as soon as I found out about it, I was aghast and ordered it withdrawn and removed from FBI systems.
You were aghast, then why won't you let us talk to the people who put it together?
We are working on finishing an internal review into what happened
We have
there.
to wait. We, the Congress, and the American people have to wait until you do an internal review. It's not a criminal investigation going on here. An internal review before we can talk to the people who wrote this?
When we finish our internal review, which will be very soon, we will come back
idea how
before
many
the
Catholics
committee
in America?
and provide a briefing on what we found.
Well, we appreciate the briefing, but we want to talk to the people who wrote it. Any idea how many Catholics there are in America, Director?
No, sir.
There's a lot, over 60 million. What percentage of those are radical traditional Catholics, according to the Richmond Field Office of the FBI?
Again, that product is not something that I will defend or excuse. It's something that I thought was appalling and removed it.
Let's read from that product, page 4 of that product. By the way, the copy you gave us, when can we get a copy that didn't have all these redactions on it so we can actually see what the American taxpayers were paying for to see their rights, their First Amendment religious liberty rights attacked? Let me just read from page 4. Provide new opportunities to mitigate extremist threat through outreach to traditional Catholic parishes and the development of sources with the placement and access to report on places of worship. That's pretty fancy language for they're trying to put informants in the parish, in the church. That's what this memorandum said, Director, from one of your field offices. And you won't let us talk to the people who did it. Any response to that?
I didn't know. I was waiting for the question.
No, you think priests should be informants inside the church, Director?
We do not recruit, open, or operate confidential human sources to infiltrate, target, report.
But that's not what this said. It sounds like you were trying to do it in Richmond, Virginia.
No, sir. No, sir.
You weren't? This didn't happen? You can assure us that this didn't happen?
That product did not, to as best as we can tell, result in any investigative action as a result of it. None.
You know what the motivation for this was? Why would they even think about doing this? You know what the motivation was?
Well, again, I think that's what our internal review will find, and I'd rather wait until I hear what the results of that internal review are.
Well, I don't need an internal review. I can read the document. I assume you can do the same, because it says right there on the same page. Richmond assesses extremist interest in radical traditional Catholics is likely to increase over the next 12 to 24 months in the run-up to the next general election. Same paragraph. Events in which extremists and radical traditional Catholics might have common cause include legislation, judicial decisions in such areas as abortion rights, immigration, affirmative action, and LGBTQ protections. It's politics. That's the motivation. In the run-up to the next election, and they talk about the border, affirmative action, and abortion rights, it's total politics. I mean, I think it's interesting that we just got a decision from a bunch of Catholics who sit on the United States Supreme Court relative to affirmative action. Politics was the total motivation here, and that's what's scary. That's what's, I think, so frightening, and how this happens, I don't know. And 5 people signed off on it. 5 people, including the Chief Division Counsel at the Richmond Field Office. I'd like to talk to this lawyer. And a lot of people in this room went to law school, get a course on the Constitution, talks about the First Amendment. I find that really scary. Again, when do you think we're going to have a chance? How soon are you going to complete this internal investigation so we can talk to these folks who put this together?
I expect us to be able to brief the committee on our internal review later this summer.
Will that briefing include the names of the individuals who put this document together attacking Americans' First Amendment liberty?
I'm not sure yet what it'll include because it's not done yet, but when it is, we'll provide you with an appropriate briefing.
What are you doing to fix it so this doesn't happen again?
Let's go ahead and stop this. So he says that no investigations were launched from this initiative. But later we were told that the redactions are to protect current investigations. So does that make sense to you? The FBI said, when they said, why are all these redactions here? And they said, well, those are to protect current investigations. But he just said there, no investigations came of this initiative.
Right. No, this he called it, what did he call it? A product? Mm-hmm. Almost like they're rolling out an Apple, like an iPhone. Yeah. No, that product never made it to market.
Right.
No, that product was never put into place. I squashed that. Oh, are you sure about that? In the Richmond Field Office, it never was enacted? No, that product never made it to. but we are redacting the names to protect ongoing investigations. Oh, okay. Something doesn't add up.
Something doesn't. Yeah.
You know what I hear when I hear that?
The ongoing.
Let's have Philip first, and then David.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say that it's sort of like they're saying like I'm sure that the redacted part said, you know, all of this is unlike this other legitimate investigation which is going on, which, you know, that would be the only way it could be hiding other investigations is if it wasn't related to that, because I mean, sorry.
Go ahead, David.
It's okay. And what I was going to say is, like, look at what he's saying, like LGBTQ, the abortion rights and stuff. How many things that have happened, crimes or whatever, that we found out later, the FBI had talked to them, the FBI had encouraged it, the FBI was part of it. That sounds to me like they're wanting to infiltrate to get people to do things, to encourage them to do things, to
like January 6th?
Yeah, like January 6th, to push the democratic narrative of, you know, what they're trying to push.
White supremacists in these churches.
Yep.
Well,
you know,
that's what Joe Biden has said, that white supremacy is the most extreme threat that the United States faces currently. So
it's the biggest threat.
Yeah, and so the FBI is going to do everything they can to try to make that true. But that's the thing. If they have to go try to make it true, then it isn't true.
Right.
Right. Yes.
Isn't that inconvenient?
And I guess that's the only political angle, because they said we need to ramp this up in advance of the election because it's going to get worse. So says this hate group that we sourced.
I got a question for you. I'd be curious how many FBI agents are churchgoers?
Are Catholics.
Are Catholics.
Yeah.
You know, and what are the percentage of FBI agents that actually go to church who are religious? You know, wouldn't anyone put their foot down to this
and say this is wrong? And also, those are protected beliefs. To be anti-LGBTQ and to be anti-abortion is allowed.
By the way, the most vocal group, by the way, it's very important. Like in Canada right now, the most vocal, outspoken group against the LGBTQ plus indoctrination of gender ideology in children are Muslims. And the Christians have been waking up in Canada saying, wait a second, the Muslims are coming out and they're doing the loudest.
They're doing what we should have been doing.
Yeah, and now they're joining together and they're launching this 1 million person march in Canada on September 20th or 21st or whatever. So Muslims, and that's interesting, right? Because this is exactly what the left doesn't want to admit. They don't want to have any denigration or acknowledgement of Muslims, who have been very outspoken against the LGBTQ plus indoctrination of children, saying, keep your hands off our children. Don't be pushing surgeries or, hormones or puberty blockers or anything on our children. And when you hear that said, of course, that's, you hear for what's her name, former Jen Psaki, former White House press secretary, says that when Muslims say that or say that out loud, they're only being influenced by the far right. That they're not free thinking.
Right. That is also the talking
point. And don't
of
you think it's
Go ahead,
don't you think it's possible that, like, the FBI has people that, like, in that field office that get together that definitely are Democrats, definitely are pushing that agenda, and they kind of like group together, and some people don't know? Because, like you said, how could you have a whole office be on board with this if there were Catholics, Republicans, if it was a split thing? So it has to be a group of people getting together and doing this outside of the system.
Right. And again, it's based on such thin ice, the way they sourced it. They're not like, oh, this one congregation in, I don't know, Chattahoochee, wherever, like, it is more of an extremist than these ones that are in Tulsa. Like, they have no proof. It's just they're sourcing it from a think tank. And so they should have more proof before they actually launch this initiative. Like, oh, maybe because some more investigations are coming from this. I mean, this is sort of like secret police society that we should be afraid to live in. We now have novels about how that happened in the last 100 years in certain society. In Portugal, the secret police or the Bolsheviks or what have you. I don't think this is what we collectively want, no matter what, again,
and
you
why
think
don't
of
you
religion.
Why don't you start with the most violent, like Antifa, and then work yourself backwards? You know what I mean? Like, infiltrate those groups first if you're going to infiltrate groups,
right,
and work your way back to nonviolent.
Yeah. Now, surprisingly, the Wall Street Journal even found this unacceptable. Here is from a staff opinion piece dated August 9th saying that, this was unacceptable. And I'm going to show you the end of this piece because I was kind of shocked that the Wall Street Journal took this freedom of liberty stance, saying that also troubling is that the FBI redacted the Portland and Los Angeles roles from the original version, which means they knew originally that it was not just one field office. So even Director Wray, even if I think it was only from Richmond, it never went anywhere. Well, he had to have seen the non-redacted version, which mentioned those two places. So then he would have known this, unless he just didn't read the non-redacted version, which is very hard to believe, right? In a letter, it said with the less redacted version, acting FBI Director Christopher Dunham said the redactions had been necessary to protect information specific to ongoing criminal investigations. Again, if that's true, why did Director Wray said no active investigations came from this memo? So the Wall Street Journal is asking what changed from March until July other than the threat of contempt from the Judiciary Committee. It's hard not to conclude that the Bureau was trying to hide the breadth of its Catholic as radicals investigation. Now, Jim Jordan's letter on Wednesday asked the FBI to fully explain the nature and scope of the FBI's assessment of traditional Catholics as potential domestic terrorists. He intends to interview the special agent in charge of the Richmond field office, and he repeats his request to interview the chief division counsel who approved the Richmond field report. Mr. Wray understandably defends his bureau's integrity, but he undermines that effort when he or his deputies aren't candid about what really happened. Not candid or just not telling the truth. There's another word for that, right? You're not supposed to lie to Congress. So either he really didn't read the non-redacted version, or he spun us a tale. So let us know what you think of this in the chat, and what you think in general of the idea of targeting religious groups in the United States, which is supposed to be the freest country in the world.
I have some things to say about Intel Pro. This is an issue. First of all, we've covered Intel Pro here on the show, and we've also covered the FBI infiltrating all sorts of drug groups and hippie communes in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've covered it actually pretty extensively here on the show. I talked about the CIA infiltration of these groups, and of course, going back decades, right? So someone in the chat, I like this super chat from Ty313, says, will you all have the same energy on Intel Pro? You all say January 6th and Catholic all things, but you right people forget history. Just pick and choose and talk about the FBI doing illegal things. No, not at all. We have no sides in this. The fact that they're doing illegal things and infiltrating groups back in the 1950s, first of all, you're referring to Intel Pro as an old story from 50 years ago. We are covering a story from today. So we could literally go through and relitigate all sorts of stories if you want. This could be a history show, and we could just have energy about things in the past. We're covering this story today. I mean, it's totally up to you. But Intel Pro, absolutely. The FBI illegally infiltrated the Black Panthers, they literally assassinated members of the Black Panther group. I mean, they literally infiltrated feminist organizations, right? So they went after left-wing feminist organizations and infiltrated them as being a threat to society. They went after the Black Panthers. They infiltrated hippie communes all throughout California, drug dens, you name it. And they actually encouraged
anti-war protesters.
That's the word. Yeah,
like
anti-war protesters.
Abby Hoffman.
Exactly. Yeah. And they encouraged them to do really bad things. So the CIA and the FBI has a long history of this, a very long history of this. You can read a great book. I just finished a book. It's pretty long. It's like 1,000 pages. I think it's called Chaos. I'll look up the name of the book, but it's literally about the Manson murders. But it's more not just about the Manson murders, but it's really about the CIA and the infiltration of these anti-war movements and the Bay Area and Berkeley and all of this stuff. So they've been doing nefarious things for decades. If you watch our show open, I think you'll realize that, no, we are not in favor of this deep state and the collusion here, this sort of engineering of narratives and trying to force these things, infiltrating the media to push fake stories. And that's what they were doing with Intel Pro. So I just want to be very clear. We're talking about this story today. but I have absolute contempt for everything that they've been doing for decades.
Yeah, and I just want to point out too, we have lost control of every branch of our government. There's not a single branch of our government that we still have control over. We've lost it all. Like, so, you know, and it started in the 50s or whatever, even before that probably. And with CIA, then the FBI, there's not a single organization that we have control over anymore, and that's dangerous. That's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, even the post office. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe the post office.
I'll have to think on that.
You have to think about.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I say mail's coming Saturday. I don't get it.
I mean,
till
that
Monday,
was
so.
hugely politicized. You know, remember like the postmaster general, like a few years ago, like where they're basically they're trying to like tank the USPS. I mean, it's all been politicized. It's all, even the Supreme Court.
Rachel
like,
Maddow
all of
told
them.
me that it was because Trump didn't want mail-in votes. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, so they're all corrupt. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.